To say Studio Gainax was something special would be a massive understatement. To say Gainax changed the game of the animation sphere would also be an understatement. To say Studio Gainax works were in a field all to their own would be an understatement because Gainax was all of these things and more. It was the place where legends made their debuts and where works that are still as revered as the day they came out to this current day. This was what Gainax was able to accomplish. Today we're going to delve into the studio known as Gainax, a studio ran by fans for fans of the medium that they love. A studio so out there that it genuinely has their own verbiage for a style of ending specifically under their belt. We all know the fate of what befalls this company, but we're going to start from the very beginning of where it started, ultimately to where it ended. I decided that due to the content that I would be covering that it's best for the video to be split into two parts, with this one going over the productions Gainax handled and their rise to fame, where the next part will chronicle where Gainax made massive errors in their tenure and other misdeeds that played a part in its unfortunate demise. And with that out of the way, I'm Leon Brando, and this is the Anime Studio Deep Dive, Studio Gainax. Before Gainax would be branded with the name Gainax and produce all of the fantastic works they were able to produce, it all started with several influential men within the space. Those men being Hideaki Anno, Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, Hiroyuki Yamaga, Takami Akai, Toshio Okada, Yasuhiro Takada, and Shinji Higuchi. Hideaki Anno is a name widely known within anime due to the creation of Neon Genesis Evangelion, a series I'll talk about later in the video. But before Anno would see monstrous success with Evangelion, he was always a person that was a big fan of the arts. Whether it was manga, anime, or stories dealing with war, Anno was captivated by the ability to tell stories. In 1980, Anno attended the Osaka University of Arts, where he would meet Hiroyuki Yamaga and Takami Akai, two other Gainax founders. He'd work with them both on school assignments. Of course, this wouldn't be the only time he's worked together with these men. In 1983, Anno worked on the production for the opening sequence of Daikon 4, which was shown off at the 22nd Japan Science Fiction Convention in Osaka. Anno was also under the wing of prolific director Hayao Miyazaki, co-founder of Studio Ghibli. Anno would serve as a key animator for the 1984 film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, even moving himself to Tokyo to be 100% dedicated towards the job he was given. December 24th, 1984 saw the creation of Studio Gainax, which was done with the effort from Anno's friends he made during his time in Osaka. But going back to another person during the founding of Gainax, we have Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. Yoshiyuki Sadamoto was an animator, character designer, and illustrator. But before he had any of these titles, Sadamoto didn't have any interest in becoming any of these things. Initially, Sadamoto opted in favor to become an art teacher, having graduated from Tokyo Zoukei University, a private university in Hachioji, Japan. After his graduation, however, Sadamoto would join Telecom and be an apprentice at Yasuo Otsuka. Later on, he would join Hideaki Anno and be a part of Studio Gainax. Hiroyuki Yamaga is a director, anime producer, and a writer. He'd work on the opening for Daikon 3 along with Takami Akai and Hideaki Anno in 1981. Yamaga would serve as the director behind Daikon 3, whereas Anno and Akai would be animation supervisors on the project. Speaking of Takami Akai, he would work on the character designs on Daikon 3 while he was attending the Osaka University of Arts, where he'd major in fine arts. In regard to another founding member of Gainax, we have Toshio Okada. Okada would be the former president of Gainax. He would be president of Gainax until his exit from the company in 1992. Next, we have Yasuhiro Takada, who's an animation producer and would become the general manager of Gainax going forward. Prior to his employment with Gainax, Takada and Okada with the group that they had made prior was called Daikon Film, and would pay undergraduates from Osaka University to help make the opening animation for Daikon 3 and 4. Daikon Film, of course, would later be turned into Studio Gainax. Lastly, we have Shinji Higuchi, who was a director, a special effects director, and designer. Alongside working with the others on Daikon Film at the time, he was also a part of the creature unit for the 1984 film, The Return of Godzilla. Shinji Higuchi would work as an assistant on the film but wasn't credited. All 7 of these men were about to make a splash in the industry. In a time where anime was booming in popularity, it would be their hunger for creating and telling stories that would shape the company going forward. Like anything, it helps to be a fan of the medium you want to produce content for, and each of these 7 men were more than just fans of the product. The name Gainax came about due to it being based on the Tottori prefecture term for giant, and it has an X at the end, so the word Gaina and the letter X were combined to make Gainax. With Hideaki Anno creating General Products, the company that would become Gainax later on, they've always had a knack for producing content that felt fun for them, and this is where Gainax would leave their mark on the anime world forever. Studio Gainax, as we know, was able to forge a name for themselves for decades to come. With a wide array of projects under their belt, it was easy to see the impact they would have on the culture. On March 14, 1987, Gainax would release a film titled Royal Space Force: The Wings of Onemisu. Hiroyuki Yamaga would be the director for this project. Shinji Higuchi, alongside Takami Akai, and Shoichi Masuo were the assistant directors. Shoichi Masuo, prior to working on Royal Space Force, he would lend his talents to Leda, The Fantastic Adventure of Yohiko, where he would work on the animation for the show. He'd also work on Macross: Do You Remember Love as an assistant animation director, and would work on Project Eiko, where he would serve as a key animator and work on the storyboard for the series. Hiromasa Ogura was behind the art direction for Royal Space Force. He'd also provide the background art for Treasure Island, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, and Tomorrow's Joe. During the time of Royal Space Force's production, Hiroyuki Yamaga and Toshio Okada would take their work from Osaka to Tokyo. This move would have set them up for their first official studio, where they rented the space out from a neighborhood in Shinjuku. With this being the studio's first work, it was time for them to take production more seriously. With the release of Royal Space Force, it wasn't necessarily a smash hit for the studio. It is held as a cult classic now and was critically acclaimed, but it didn't do much to really bring it to the races commercially. Of course, this wouldn't be what Gainax is known for, but more on that later. Toshio Okada, in an interview with Animerica in 1995, would touch on why he believed Royal Space Force didn't really grasp a broader audience. He'd say that, "Our goal at first was to make a very realistic film, so we couldn't have the kind of strong, dramatic construction you'd find in a Hollywood movie. Wings is an art film, and at the time, I thought that was very good, but now when I look back, I realize this was a major motion picture. Bandai spent a lot of money on it. It was our big chance. Maybe if I'd given it a little stronger structure and a little simpler story, change it a little, make it not so different, it could have met the mainstream." On October 7th, 1988, Gainax would produce the OVA Gunbuster, created by Toshio Okada, and was the directorial debut of Hideaki Anno, also written by him as well, alongside Hiroyuki Yamaga and Okada. Gunbuster was important because it would be with this project where Gainax would establish the tone of how the creative process works. Gunbuster, funnily enough, would be the first anime where breast jiggling served as a part of fan service, ultimately landing the term Gainaxing whenever it was present in other animes. Works like Top Gun and Aim for the Ace were direct inspirations to the creation of Gunbuster. With Gunbuster itself and his penchant for comedy and parody, this would be a hallmark in the anime industry, especially for fans of the time and fans of today. In Japan, it was titled Aim for the Top Gunbuster, a reference to Aim for the Ace. Gunbuster would be instrumental to the next anime Anno would be behind, but we'll get to that in a sec. Gunbuster would release its last episode on July 7th, 1989, with its final episode shot fully in black and white, a stylistic choice made by Toshio Okada, stating that he wanted the episode to be black and white because old school science fiction felt more futuristic to him, lacking some of the garish colors of 1960s and 1970s sci-fi. The late 80s and early 90s were swimming with OVAs, and Gainax saw the opportunity to strike with something of their own, and with something brimming with personality, Gainax would try to carry the momentum into their other works. On April 13th, 1990, Gainax released Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water, a concept that came from the mind of none other than Hayao Miyazaki, taking inspiration from Jules Verne's works. Jules Verne being a French poet and novelist, but it would be inspired by works like Captain Nemo and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Around this time, and especially during the 70s and 80s, anime were based on a lot of Western or European literature, so to see this have the inspiration that it does is very in line for the times. Having begun development in the 70s with Miyazaki, he was tasked by Toho Company, another prominent production company, to create a television series for them. Although nothing would come of this until 1988, when Toho still retained the story rights for Nadia and would give an up-and-coming Gainax the reins behind the project. Toshio Okada would speak on the production of Nadia in the same interview with Animerica. Okada stated that Nadia was true chaos, good chaos, and bad chaos. On Nadia, Anno didn't direct the middle episodes, Shinji Higuchi did, and some episodes were directed in Korea. Why? No one knows exactly. That's real chaos, not good. What I mean to say is, controlled chaos that's good. Controlled chaos is where you've got all the staff in the same room looking at each other. But on Nadia, you had Higuchi saying, "Oh, I'll surprise Anno, hide and change the screenplay." Screenplays and storyboards got changed when people went home, and then the next morning, if no one could find the original, I authorized them to go ahead with the changes. No one can be a real director or a real scriptwriter in such a chaotic situation. On Nadia, half of our staff was Korean, living overseas. We never met them. No control. Okada's words are very important because he puts a lot of emphasis on controlled chaos. Gainax as it stood was not a company that was predicated on structure. Actually, it would be the complete opposite of that. Okada spoke more on this fact when asked what made Gainax different from other animation studios. He said, yeah, Gainax is not a professional film studio. Gainax is a super amateur film studio, a super otaku film studio. A Gainax animator thinks not only about motion, but about the editing, the lighting. That's very difficult, and because we do it, we are amateurs as opposed to a professional studio with a strict division of labor. Although this was the case for projects, Nadia would eventually get a feature film in 1991, but different staff would helm the project. This happened due to NHK, a Japanese broadcasting corporation, asked for this change. NHK were actually the ones that requested Nadia to have more episodes, seeing as the show was a success in Japan, so Gainax would produce 9 additional episodes after the 30 they originally planned to do were finished. Sho Aono would direct the film, this being his only project next to directing 2 episodes of Every Day is Sunday. Koichi Takada, who worked on the original series as an animation director, would also be an animation director for the movie alongside doing character design with Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. Koichi Takada's other works later on would include being a storyboard artist for Noragami, Food Wars, and The Disastrous Life of Saiki K. Unfortunately with Nadia, Gainax would land themselves with 80 million yen in debt, which equates to $548,452 today. You'll notice a trend of Gainax landing itself in debt due to the projects they undertake later on in their tenure. With Nadia, however, not only were they in debt over the anime itself, but they also didn't own the rights to the anime, so any additional money that could have been made from Nadia could not be obtained by Gainax. No merch sales, no royalties, nothing. All of this hard work but reaping none of the benefits. It was quite the blow to Gainax. Granted, Gainax was still keeping the revenue going due to their games division making enough money to keep the company alive. Also during this time in 1992, Toshio Okada would exit the company. Okada served as Gainax's president for 10 years. Okada wouldn't be the only person to exit the company during this time either. Shinji Higuchi would exit the company and would co-found Studio Gonzo along with other animators. Gainax having lost 2 founding members in the same year was massive. It seemed like the company was crumbling at the seams. Several staff exiting the company as it was, it didn't look good for Gainax's future. Attempt after attempt after attempt for the company netted them with nothing for their works. While their works would be viewed and appreciated at the time, it didn't do much for the monetary aspect of their content creation. Gainax would generally need something to pull them out of the trenches. They'd need a guardian angel. That angel being Neon Genesis Evangelion. Releasing on October 3rd, 1995, this singular piece of media has been talked about in every facet of the internet you could humanly think of. YouTube, Facebook, internet forums, anything with any social aspect attached to it, Evangelion was discussed. It's one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. It is a hallmark of the anime industry and pop culture, even influencing films like Nope. Hope genuinely seemed lost for Gainax, and they couldn't have asked for a better pick-me-up. By 2007, the series grossed over 150 billion yen in revenue, which equates to $1,021,207,500. Kazuya Tsurumaki would be an assistant director on Evangelion. He's another valued asset of Gainax, being a long-term animator for the company. Of course, his biggest contribution to Gainax would be the creation of Fooly Cooly, but more on that a bit later. With the end of Evangelion releasing in 1997 to cap off and give a definitive ending to the series, Gainax was on top of the world with this major success. But unfortunately, the good times wouldn't always last. In 1999, then president of Gainax Takeshi Sawamura and the studio tax accountant at the time, Yoshikatsu Iwasaki, were arrested on allegations of tax fraud. This was earned during the release of Evangelion in July 1997. In 1999, they were both found guilty of concealing 1.5 billion yen in corporate earnings, thereby failing to pay 580 million yen in corporate taxes. To put this into perspective in USD, they would have been hiding $10,212,075. Mainichi Shimbun reports that Takeshi Sawamura allegedly evaded paying corporate taxes by reporting fictitious costs for company software during the years 1996 and 1997. Yasuhiro Takada would speak further on the matter in his tell-all book, The Non-Techie Memoir, Studio Gainax and the Men Who Created Evangelion. He'd state that, Sawamura understood our financial situation better than anyone, so when Evangelion took off and the money really started rolling in, he saw it as possibly our one and only opportunity to set something aside for the future. I guess he was vulnerable to temptation at that point, because no one knew how long the Evangelion goose would keep laying golden eggs. I don't think he purposely set out with the goal of evading taxes. It was more that our level of accounting knowledge wasn't up to the task of dealing with revenues on such a large scale. Gainax would continue to produce other animes like Karekano, Modern Love Silliness, and Ebichu, but in the year 2000 a new series would be formed by even hungrier talent than before, that series being Fooly Cooly. Fooly Cooly is no stranger to the channel, but this series is very in tune with the spirit of Gainax. This series is very synonymous with Gainax being a staple within the company. Kazuya Tsurumaki, the creator of Fooly Cooly, was asked questions by fans at the 2001 Otakon convention in Baltimore. He was asked if Fooly Cooly was supposed to be as bizarre as it was. Tsurumaki would respond with, "From the very start I wanted a different flavor. To achieve this I had to retrain the animators to be as stylized as I wanted it to be because I wasn't drawing it. I knew that not everyone would get it. I deliberately selected very obscure J-pop culture and anime subculture jokes and references. Because Eva was so somber, I always intended to make Fooly Cooly outrageous and wacky." He was also asked why so many of the male protagonists that Gainax creates are unhappy with no parents. Tsurumaki replied with, "Yes, the directors at Gainax are all basically weak, insecure, bitter young men. So are many anime fans. Many Japanese families, including my own, have workaholic fathers whose kids never get to see them. That may influence the shows I create." Gainax was bent on not giving you the same experience multiple times whenever something would release. It would have an imaginative flair that's akin to their studio. But Gainax always had their finger on the pulse of the culture. While Fooly Cooly wasn't nearly as successful or recognizable as Evangelion, it would be a cult classic on the Western Front. It helps that Gainax always had younger staff at the ready, always ready and willing to prove themselves. It showed that even at this time and current juncture of the company that Gainax had a never say die attitude. With the anime space at the time being extremely competitive where studios were pushing out their best work or beginning to get their footing, Gainax was in that same vein. 2000 was the dawn of a new era, and the 2000s was just that for Gainax. It was a defining era for the company especially. Already capping it off with Fooly Cooly, it was a very strong start to a decade that would make anime fans fall in love with multiple works produced by them. On August 19, 2002, a short was directed by Hideaki Anno, but who'd serve as the art director, the character designer, and scriptwriter would be none other than Hiroyuki Amaishi. Amaishi having joined Gainax in 1995, a name widely known in the anime space as well and someone I've talked about before on the channel. He'd work on a short called Anime Tensho, this being his first work where he'd be in charge of art direction. Yo Yoshinari would be a key animator on this project. Yo Yoshinari along with Hiroyuki Amaishi are important figures in anime, especially with what Amaishi would achieve later on in his career in just a bit. Gainax were always big on comedies, making sure the fans were entertained, and Magical Shopping Arcade Abenodashi was just in line to do so. Releasing on April 4, 2002, co-animating the series alongside Madhouse, Hiroyuki Yamaga would return to the directing seat for this show. This wouldn't be the only show they'd co-animate with other studios. Series like Cutie Honey, This Ugly Beautiful World, Petite Princess Yusi, and Corpse Princess, there were a ton of shows that Gainax and other companies would lend their talents to. 2006 would be an interesting year for one of the founders of Gainax. Something major was happening. In May 2006, Hideaki Anno, one of the leading founders of the company, would be forming his own company, a company named Studio Kara, and was looking for animators to bring along. Studio Kara's plan was to produce films. In 2007, the following year, Kara would release the first series of movies for Evangelion titled Evangelion 1.0 You Are Not Alone. In October 2007, Hideaki Anno would resign from Studio Gainax. Another leading member, with that member being Anno himself, was massive, but his departure wasn't a negative by any means. Anno would actually allow Gainax to retain the rights to merchandising for Evangelion, but Studio Kara would get royalties on works that Anno was involved in, like being a director or a creator of said work, a deal that felt mutually beneficial to both parties, except this would later come back to bite Anno in the future. Of course, on April 1st, 2007, Gainax would release Gurren Lagann, a series I spoke on back when I talked about Studio Trigger not too long ago, the breakout hit for Gainax and Hiroyuki Amaishi's debut series. This was, and still is, an anime staple. Gainax was essentially riding a monstrous wave at this point during the 2000s, but it wouldn't last once the 2010s came.